तू डायरिया से मर सकता है, तू हार्ट अटैक से मर सकता है, तू डायबिटीज से मर सकता है, तू एड्स से मर सकता है, तू वैसे मर सकता है, मगर अगर तूने हिम्मत की कोविड से मरने की तो मैं तेरी जान ले लूंगा दूसरे तरीके से, मगर कोविड से नहीं मरने दूंगा तुझे. I don't believe India has a right wing. India has a non-left. People who don't like to call themselves the left. The day governments realize that their job is to get out of our life, not get into our life, the world will be a better place.
Right. Hey everyone, welcome to another podcast of Samachar. Today we have with us Kushal Mehra. He's the host of one of the most informative and knowledgeable podcasts in India called the Charvak Podcast. On the podcast, he discusses a lot of topics related to Indian history, Indian culture, religion, mythology, society, and he has some amazing guests. And unlike most shows, he gives them proper time and space to speak their mind. And it's probably one of the best podcasts in India currently. So, Kushal, great pleasure to have you here and looking forward to an interesting discussion with you. So,
Thanks a lot for having me.
yeah, it's our pleasure. So, Kushal, I wanted to ask you some stuff about your podcasting career to start with. So, I believe your podcast has been running for like the past 4 years. So, what inspired you to start that journey?
Yeah, I think I actually don't know exactly when I started. It must be around 3.5 to 4 years. I honestly don't remember the day. But I came across podcasting by an accident. I used to watch a lot of shows on mixed martial arts, and
Right.
through that I got into podcasting. I started watching sports podcasting, and then I was like, wow, this concept is so unique, where people actually talk for a long time and they don't cut each other off. Because before that, like, I stopped watching Indian news television now for 7 years because they shout at each other as if pata nahi, they are mortal enemies, and I never got that.
Right.
So I used to find it very frustrating. But then in between, you still need some diet. Like, okay, books are there, but you need something beyond books too. So I just came across these discussions where, and primarily it was through mixed martial arts discussions, nothing else. But then what happens is the YouTube algorithm does its thing, right? It knows what your preferences are, and then it starts recommending things. And then I got exposed to podcasts outside India. So my first exposure was to podcasts in America, where they would I'm talking about beyond the realm of sport. So from there I was like, wow, these people don't even talk for 45 minutes. In the case of Rogan, he talks for 2.5 to 3.5 hours. And apparently it's fine. Yeah, and people, like, recently Sam Harris did a podcast this week with Balaji Srinivasan. That discussion was 4 hours. And so somebody might say, how can you speak for 4 hours? But then you listen to the content, you'll be like, ये तो 10 घंटे तक बात कर सकते हैं इस विषय के ऊपर. And that's when I was like, who's doing it in India? So I mean, there were people in the left who were podcasting in India, but in the socio-political space, I don't believe India has a right wing. India has a non-left. People who don't like to call themselves the left. Or who are not aligned with the left. So there was nobody in the non-left space, pretty much. I mean, there was one daily news and views podcast, Mind Makers, happening from America. And beyond that, there was nothing where there were, at least the kind I do, where there are regular one-on-one chats. Nobody was doing that. So I was like, okay, let me give it a shot. And I started it. And then obviously for the first 2.5 years, so even I was like, हफ्ते में एक बार बात करो kind of a thing, या महीने में 2 बार बात करो. And then I think slowly but surely, one after the other, things started falling in place. And post-pandemic, actually, last year, where none of us had a job. So that's when my podcast really took off. Because I had time, so I could give it a lot of time. People knew I was a podcaster before that too.
Right.
But I was not doing it with the frequency that I should have been doing it.
Right.
And then in the last year and a half, though, I mean, the podcast has just taken off, and Now I've reached a place I just have to write an email to someone and they happily come and chat with me. So
Right.
it's not been an issue. So pretty much that's been the journey. And I also had a very clear cut view that I did not want to make a podcast about either this or that. Like I did not want to brand myself in a way that इसके यहाँ पे sports के discussion होते हैं या religion के होते हैं या he talks about something else. I wanted to talk about whatever I find interesting, and this whole this notion that if you're on the internet you have to pick your genre, and I wanted to challenge this notion where I did not want to pick my genre. I was like, no, I'll talk about whatever. So my podcast, you'll have mixed martial arts discussions, cricket discussions, religion discussions, anything that I find interesting. It's basically I have to find it interesting is the only qualifying criteria. Even what my audiences find interesting is not a qualifying criteria. The only qualifying criteria is what I want to talk about. And if people happen to like it, fine. If they don't like it, fine, I'll still do it.
Right. So it seems kind of inspired like by Joe Rogan, like it has that same feel where you're basically exploring life on your own terms and trying to get like more other parties with whom you can have a decent discussion around whatever interests you at the moment.
Yeah, pretty much. I think even Joe Rogan is pretty much, I don't know, I've never heard him express it, but from how one looks at it from outside, it definitely looks like that, where he seems to, like he's obviously a mixed martial arts commentator. So he talks to mixed martial artists all the time, and then he'll have scientists on, and then he'll have comedians on, and then he'll have like adventure extreme sports folks on, then he'll have, so he also, I think he does the same thing, like he'll talk to whosoever he wants to talk to. And the good thing is he talks to people across the spectrum, not just from, let's say, his ideological bent, because Joe Rogan definitely is a more left-leaning person at an individual level, but he'll have a Ben Shapiro on, and he'll have a conversation with a Steven Crowder and a Milo Yiannopoulos. He doesn't care, he'll talk to everyone.
Right. Like everyone from like Bernie Sanders on to like Alex Jones, everyone in between, you talk to them, right?
And Alex Jones is the most entertaining.
Yeah. So the Charvak way of life is obviously important to you. You have named your podcast after that, and you have often said that you're a self-professed Charvak. So many in the audience may not know today like what being a Charvak means. Even I myself don't know it to a large extent, as much as you would, definitely. So could you briefly explain what the Charvak philosophy is all about and what attracted you to it?
Well, as far as the title Charvak, obviously Charvak as the word itself, the etymology is basically Charu plus Vak, which is sweet tongued. That is one of the words that means. Then I think it was Gunaratna in the 8th century that said Charva stands for chewing, grinding with the teeth and swallowing the virtues and vices. So obviously this is a combination of two words, like it is from the Lokayatikas. Lokayat, Loka means the world and Ayata means basis. So that's where the word and the etymology comes from. As far as what Charvakas are, let us be very clear. What we know about Charvakas are purely from a second-hand perspective, or in Sanskrit we call it Purva Paksha. So we don't know a first-hand perspective of Charvakas is because the books are not there, or the only book that is there, which is the Tattva Paplava Simha by Jayasri Bhatta, is also kind of written in a format which is called Vitanda, where you're in that stand, you don't clarify your stand, you just make fun of others or point flaws in others. So even in there, you don't know what the Lokayatikas stand for. But so in ancient India, there were 9 primary darshanas, right? 6 Astika and 3 Nastika. And the differentiations between Astika and Nastika is not a belief and disbelief in a Ishwar. The differentiation between an Astika and a Nastika is whether you consider the Vedas to be a supreme authority or not. So while the Sankhya Darshan was Astik, it was Nirishwarvadi. It did not believe in an Ishwar. The Mimamsakas, I think the old Mimamsakas, were Nirishwarvadi but Astikas, because both Sankhya and Mimamsa considered Vedas to be the supreme authority. While on the other hand, the Jaina Bauddha Charvak were Nirishwarvadis, but they did not consider the Vedas to be the supreme authority. So that is the old classification of what the darshanas were in terms of classification. Now Charvaks obviously, and then you have the pramana system, right? Epistemology, means of attaining knowledge. So
Right.
Indian epistemology has 6 pramanas.
Hmm.
I'm not going to state all 6, but Charvakas only believed in one out of them, which was pratyaksha, which is direct or indirect perception.
Right.
And now there is some debate whether they did consider inference or not. From my reading, I don't think they considered inference valid, because they always give this example. Like I always try to explain with this, right? Why inference is not the best form is like a Charvak could say that, let's say, the old adage is that if there is smoke, there must be fire. How do you infer that? Because when you cook in your house, you burn wood or you light the gas, when you do that, there is fire, and when there is fire, there comes smoke. So infer from that if there is smoke on the mountaintop, there is fire. But then what if it was dry ice? Is my Charvak answer. So we can't be certain. So inference is not the most certain way of living your life. Having said that, you can always live your life using inference as a good tool or a good point of view, but it is not 100% perfect.
Right.
So that is the way, like a Charvak would be like, I'll send a drone and I'll check whether that smoke is because of fire or dry ice. That is the Charvak answer. So that is the basis. Obviously, like I said, you have to be very careful. See, as far as textual evidence is concerned, you had these 3 books where there was a mention of Charvaks. Obviously, one is the Sarvadarshan Sangraha by Madhava Vidyaranya. Then there was the Sarva Siddhanta Sangraha by Shankara. And then there was this play called Prabodha Chandrodaya. Now, in Prabodha Chandrodaya, basically was written by an Advaitin to criticize the Charvak point of view from Advaitin, and they try to give so these are the books that, I mean, you have mentions of the Charvaks in the Ramayana, in the Mahabharata in a pejorative way. Then you'll have maybe some Buddhist text criticized. So all you know about the Charvaks is through their criticism. So the point is that whatever you claim to be the Charvak point of view is the other person's explanation of what the Charvak point of view was.
Right.
So that is why I take all of that with a grain of salt, while I accept their versions, because I can't dismiss them all. But I say that, and I always say this logic, people will tell me, but Charvak to bolte the ghee khao, rin lo, matlab udhar lo aur apni zindagi jiyo kind of a thing. I was like, wait, wo Charvak bolte the na? Maine bola, ek time. No, not only that, and what kind of a nonsensical argument is this, that a Charvak is stuck in time for eternity with the same views that were there in, say, 5,000 years ago, but your darshan is allowed to update and upgrade itself however you want to. It's like if I use a strawman like this, I pick something that Shankara said long time ago, and I said, look, Shankara says this, but it doesn't formulate with today's view. They'll be like, that is Shankara's view, I'm a new Advaitin. So I am a new Charvak. That's what I say. So my morality does not stem directly from a strictly old school Charvak point of view. But the reason I chose this name was that this was not for anything else, but I wanted to differentiate myself from which I think is the biggest disease these days, is new atheism.
Okay.
And new atheism stems from this whole movement that stemmed in the mid to late 90s with Dawkins. And now I'm a fan of Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris and Dennett, for the record, but I still think new atheism is a disease, and I'll explain why new atheism is a disease. New atheism is a disease because, unlike the old school skeptics, whether it was a Charvak or anything, they believed in leave me alone kind of a skepticism. There was no such thing where I don't want to be associated with kya bolte hain usko, I don't want to be religious, you don't impose your religiosity on me and leave me alone, and I'm fine the way it is. But new atheism basically became religion is the root cause of all disease, God. Religion is evil, you need to throw and destroy religion, everything is bad in this world is because of religion, so we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And because of that, now today you have a society that is coming back with religion, which is I call atheism plus, which is wokeism. This is why I was always opposed to new atheism from the beginning. It's like I'm one of those weird atheists. I don't know if I should call myself one because I don't. So skeptics or disbelievers who are thrown out. I am thrown out more out of atheistic groups online than religious groups online. I have the unique distinction of being thrown out of atheistic groups. I remember I was thrown out of Nirmukta. I was thrown out of the Dawkins Forum because I used to question their worldview. I was like, there is no firm worldview. So I definitely believe the reason I started the Charvak Darshan and I tried to promote the Charvak Darshan the way I do is because I wanted to give an alternative to people. See, there are a lot of disbelievers who are very uncomfortable in the new atheistic paradigm. They just don't like it. They feel very uncomfortable with this aggressive atheism, which is licking the Bible, humping the Quran, desecrating Hindu idols. No, decent people don't do that. They just want to challenge religious claims. They just want to have rational debates and they want to be left alone beyond a point. Right. And with new atheism, I think it was overdoing it. And that's why a lot of skeptics, I'm not one, I get hundreds of emails in a month from Indian skeptics, Pakistani skeptics. Right. Or like, we are not comfortable with this whole movement of, very aggressive destruction of religion. We just want our rights. That's all. We just want the right to blaspheme and be an apostate. That's all. Right. And I think for them also and for Hindus, so there is no concept of blasphemy and apostasy. So that's a different issue. But for me, the reason was I wanted to showcase that, you don't need to be a new atheist to have disbeliefs. And you can have your own way. And India always had it. And I don't need to, follow the model which is alien to me and my life and my upbringing. So that's the short reason why I decided to call it Charvak.
Right. So, obviously you're very deep into the philosophical aspects and looking into like the traditions of, Indian epistemology and thought process across different metrics. So, what has ignited your interest in like Indian culture, Indian history, philosophical traditions, and why is it so important for you that it's a huge part of the Charvak podcast. Like a lot of the shows or a lot of the episodes are you talking about stuff that you have researched a little deeper on with respect to Indian philosophy. So, what ignited your interest in these fields?
We just want to know the truth. I think I'm just a truth seeker, and anybody who's a truth seeker would naturally get inclined to these routes. And so for a believer, there is the Bhakti Marg. There is but in a person like me who's a disbeliever, so Bhakti Marg goes out. So for me, it was either Gyan or Karma.
Right.
So I'm following the Gyan and Karma Marg, and I think you just have to read. And if you want to know what the reality, I was always a curious person. I wanted to understand why the world is the way it is. Why do people behave the way they do? And why do two cultures have such differing moral arches? And why does one culture believe in X and the other Y? And can we create a universal moral framework? And these were the questions that always fascinated me for years. And that's what got me into philosophy. And then I kept on studying, and I found there's something very unique in the Indian framework where, unlike a lot of Indians these days who promote postmodernism, decoloniality, and post-colonialism, Indian epistemologies are actually very objectivist. They're not relativistic. Right. And I find it hilarious where Indians use these postmodern tools or because of the Indian, see, even from a believer's perspective, if you believe in karma and you believe in reincarnation, then you cannot believe that the mind is a blank slate, which is what the scientific view is. The science today believes that we have certain evolutionary imprints on our brain even when we are born. So the mind is not a blank slate as such. Yes, we have a gene culture co-evolution, and definitely a culture plays a humongous role in the way our makeup is. But that doesn't mean we fall for that, classic Rousseauian worldview where we are a blank slate, we are tabula rasa. And what I find hilarious is that a lot of Hindus think the mind is tabula rasa. As like, तुमने तो ना Hinduism पढ़ा है ना science पढ़ी है, दोनों ही नहीं पढ़ा है तुमने. So it is actually very funny. As the Hindus are using decoloniality to criticize the the colonial rule. I was like, you don't need decoloniality to criticize the colonial rule. It's just there, and you can objectively criticize it.
I mean,
but
inherently
I think the
bad in
problem
any
is
framework.
yeah, it is inherently bad in any framework. But the problem is the Indians who use decoloniality, they don't want to admit to their own flaws. And when they don't want to admit to their own flaws, they use relativism, right? See, the beauty of relativism is कि when I am wrong, I will say that is as per your standard. When I want to prove myself right, that is also as per my standard. So everything is good and bad as per my standard. So I am good all the time. This is the beauty of relativism. I am never bad.
Right.
So I think this is the case. And in my reading of Indian frameworks, whether so let's take Anekantwad, right? Anekantwad has that 7-step system: Syad Asti, Syad Nasti, Syad Asti Nasti, Syad Asti Cha, Syad Asti Nasti Cha, etc., whatever it is. Like maybe this, maybe that, maybe this and that, maybe this or that kind of a scenario. But even in that, at the end, they say there is a truth. They don't say there is no truth. They say the truth is hard to find. We should work hard. We should have a plural framework when we are looking at the truth. As they say, the 5 blind men, the 5 men with the thing, patti on their eye, and they try to touch the elephant. They're touching the same object, but somebody might hold the trunk, somebody might hold the tail, somebody might hold the leg, somebody might touch the eye, and they'll have a different perspective. But the point is, it's still an elephant. At the end, it is an elephant. The truth is, it is an elephant. Yes. So the Anekantwad view of Jainism was that, yes, it is complicated. So do not confuse, often what Jonathan Haidt used the beautiful word, he called it moral dumbfounding. Do not confuse moral dumbfounding with moral relativism. Just because we are morally dumbfounded does not mean we are moral relativists. We are moral objectivists. We just don't have good answers every time. And this is the whole point for me. Through my podcast, I wanted to create a worldview where I use evolutionary psychology ka principles, which is as scientific as it gets. I use the principles of Indian epistemology, also Western epistemology. I'm not allergic to Western epistemology at all. I'm not a West-hating person. I like the West. I like the East. I like the West. I will take whatever good is offered from wherever and present a new framework, which I believe is better for the world. Do I have any delusions of grandeur ki I will change the world? No, but I like doing that. Who's stopping? See, I'm stopping no one from doing their own thing. I mean, nobody's obliged to click on my channel and watch it. But if you come on my channel, will try to present a new universal framework based on mutual respect and not tolerance, is what my aim is.
Right. So, like, I have always found like a lot of the content on your channel very deeply intriguing, and also like the guests that you get on. And like in this discussion, right? Like briefly, you touched upon how like philosophical insights could also be tied to modern scientific interpretations as well, and like that becomes another lens to look at it. Like for example, the blank slate example that you gave, like a clear example from what we can see in the world, like a giraffe is born, an antelope is born, it just starts running, right? Like bachcha paida hota, then there is some default software in the brain, right? I mean,
absolutely.
And like the nature of a beast or of an animal is something that is inherited over time. That's how you went from wolves to dogs, right? Like you would not be able to keep a wolf in a house, but dogs are like much friendlier and tame. So obviously, like some aspect of the psychological framework or the nature of animals does pass down in some way or the other. It cannot just be like it's a blank slate and people pick up stuff from nature only. So my point is like there is always like another scientific perspective towards these viewpoints that also kind of seem to validate it from another angle. So is that something that you tend to also mix into your content on your podcasts?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I'm a huge believer that evolutionary psychology should be a compulsory subject for each and every person, because it's so weird that we believe in evolution till here, and above the chin evolution doesn't happen. How the hell can that happen? I mean, ऐसा थोड़ा होता है कि evolution हर जगह हुई मगर ये इसके ऊपर brain में नहीं हुई. Evolution has to happen everywhere. And to say, I mean, just think about it. They did such detailed studies in Sweden. They did this study on toy preferences between young girls and young boys, right? And see, it doesn't become more gender neutral than Sweden or Nordic countries in general. Like till the extent that they find toy companies who put gender stereotypical images on toys. So if you put a boy on a monster truck, they'll fine you. They actively discourage that. But then they did a toy preference study of around 40,000 children, if I remember correctly. Guess what? The boys liked monster trucks, the girls liked Barbie dolls after 40 years of this deprogramming that they've done in Sweden. So there are certain innate characteristics, and you can find them in other, like in baboons in the animal kingdom. When they play with toys, also the same thing happened with the male and female baboons. I'm not saying nurture has zero role. Nurture has a humongous role, but nature also has a role. And this is why this entire framework, and my podcast and my aim is to create a moral ethical lens. See, I'm a moral ethical philosophy guy. I focus there more than anything. I focus there. I always, even when my guests come, my question to them is always from a moral ethical point of view. Like, why should you do this? What is the implication of this thing that you're proposing on a society? Like, it's very simple, right? Sometimes, what if somebody comes and gives, I'll be very open here. What if somebody gives a defense of the घूंघट प्रथा? Just, और चलो घूंघट नहीं, उसके पहले वाली प्रथा, कोई भी कर लो, ठीक है? And then I'll say like, so do you defend the burqa? And they'll be like, that is a Muslim's problem. That is such a relativistic answer.
Right.
And people do this, and people in the Muslim world do it, people in the Christian world do it, people in the Hindu world do it. And my whole point is that there are certain moral ethical codes that can be universal. To say they are not universal is just wiggling away and lying to yourself. And my podcast, what I try to do is I try to bring the framework of evolutionary psychology. I'm not from that background. My background is philosophy. But what I'm trying to do is do some multidisciplinary work where, you know, you try to read books written by these people, whether it's Leda Cosmides, John Tooby, Stuart Williams, Garth Saad, and David Buss, and many other authors. There are like Steven Pinker is there. There are so many evolutionary psychologists. If you read them, and then you read Indian darshanas, and then you try to bring a blend of this, and you create a moral framework where, and also you can use, let's say, you know, the harm principle of Western philosophy, because I believe that's a great epistemic tool in legal, frameworks, like the harm principle. It's very simple.
Right.
You violate the, often people don't understand that, how does the tussle between individual rights and group rights get solved? I believe it gets solved from the harm principle. Like, where do you see the harm principle being violated? Like, the individual right to drink should be there, but the right to drink and drive should not be there. Why? Because there your group rights come up. Bhai, tum daru pi ke maar doge, logon ko uda doge, the harm principle is violated. My aim through the podcast is not to say India is the greatest or the West is the greatest, or this is the greatest or that is the. My aim is that yes, we should be universalists. I believe that the Western world is missing out on India by being Western universalists. I believe that I want to be a East-West universalist. I want to take the best of the East, the best of the West. Like, what is wrong in the Socratic method? It's a beautiful tool. Use it, Baba. I use it myself. I use the Socratic method every day in my life. I think Socrates was a great thinker. But the point is that I also think Buddha was a great thinker. I believe Shankara was a great thinker. Sri Krishna was a great thinker. Like, who would say Nishkam Karma is an inferior way to live your life? I mean, Karmanye Vadikaraste Mafaleshu Kadachana is one of the greatest philosophies to live your life with. One of the greatest. And why won't you learn from that? So I might be a Charvak at a personal way, but that doesn't mean I'll not learn from Sri Krishna. If Sri Krishna is a great philosopher, I believe he's a great philosopher. He might be an Ishwar to others. For me, he's not an Ishwar. He's a great philosopher, a great thinker. And I've learned so much from Sri Krishna. And why shouldn't I? So I don't see, मेरा दिमाग ही नहीं समझ पाता है कि लोगों को अपने आप को साइलोज में क्यों डालना है. मैं तो अगर मुझे कल प्रॉफिट मोहम्मद से भी कुछ सीखने को मिलेगा, मैं तो उससे भी सीख लूं. मुझे तो ये समझ, the Indian way was always learn from everyone and do your thing. But nowadays we seem to have twisted it and made it something else, which is what I find perplexing.
Right. Like across the world, from like different geographies, from like different geographical conditions, different societies have arisen, and like over thousands of years, from their experiences, they've distilled out a lot of knowledge. Some has been recorded, some books have been destroyed. Whatever's left, wouldn't it make sense, like in general, for people to, you know, like assimilate all the knowledge that's possible. That gives you a holistic perspective of how humanity works, right? Like the a general aspect that we do see in at least the old school Western thought process was just rejecting everything that was Eastern, right? And that's like
Yeah,
rejecting more than half of humanity. If you take India and China and Southeast Asia into account, you're just disregarding the history of half of humanity and the intellectual output that has come out of those societies. And that's
absolutely.
when you
Absolutely.
have
And
those books,
similarly, it
why
applies on the Indians also.
yes, right.
So
So
that's my whole point here. As long as
hmm,
you're open-minded and as long
hmm,
as you're willing to learn based on proper evidence from others, I think
hmm,
you will be fine. The moment you close yourself to all opportunities, and this doesn't mean that you become so open-minded that you keep taking flat earth also. No, flat earth
huh,
is not being open-minded. I mean, there are certain lines, but I mean, you know what I'm trying to say, but
right, right,
I just don't see that.
hmm, right. So in the modern world, the ideological divide seem to be deepening, and society seems to be fracturing along like multiple ideological lines. It's not just like simply two partisan system, right? Although people would want to project every division like that on every issue, right? Be it the smallest of political issues or rights issues or religious issues, there are always like two sides, and people seem to be getting deeper and deeper into their own silos and into their own ideological camps. Uh, what role do you see social media would have played into this, because this seems to have manifested to a much higher level in the 2010s. That is when social media was also on the rise. That's when people got the facility to talk to everyone, got the facility and the ability to talk to thousands of people.
I think there is no clear-cut data beyond certain studies here and there. As far
Hmm.
as I know, from what I have studied or read, is in social media only 10 to 15% are really active. Most of the people are passive consumers. So how do you know
Right.
what the passive consumer is thinking based on just what is there?
Hmm.
Secondly, I think I don't believe the world is becoming more rigid. I think the world keeps becoming better and better. It is just
Right.
that, see, we lived in a world before social media where we were not bombarded with so much information on a daily basis. And we were not required. See, okay, chalo,
Hmm.
we were bombarded with information through the news media, but we were not required to opine on things on a daily basis, or we did not
Right.
have the means and avenues to opine on a daily basis. Now what has happened these days is like we are walking, talking opinion machines. It's like,
Huh.
I went here, I will give an opinion. I went
Huh.
there, and this includes me, by the way. I'm
Hmm.
not excluding myself, I'm including myself. But while I include myself, I'm just making an analysis of what we are going through right now. We are
Huh.
over opinionated and under informed, in my view.
Right.
I try to be over informed and less opinionated. I don't like, I go through many times, people will come on the podcast. I do these monologues. What is your view on XYZ? I'm like, why do you want me to have an opinion on it? I
Huh.
don't understand. Why should I? मैं कौन सा बड़ा परम ज्ञानी हूं? And this is a classic case of that halo effect. Na? Because I
Huh.
know X, I should have an opinion on Y, and my opinion on X, because it is accurate sometimes, makes my opinion on Y, which I know nothing about, accurate. I mean, come
Hmm.
on, it is ridiculous. But I think overall social media has been a net positive. Look, I am not
Hmm.
someone who's going to say social media has destroyed my life. I think it's made my life
Hmm.
better.
Hmm.
If social media nahi hoti, I would not have come across great people that I came across. Now, I've come across gems like Guru Prakash
Hmm.
Paswan, Abhinav Prakash Singh, Harsh
Hmm.
Madhusudan, Nikhil Mehra, Abhijit
Hmm.
Iyer,
Hmm.
and so many others. Rahul
Hmm.
Roshan,
Hmm.
just to name a few. I would
Right.
never have explored these people if not for social media. I would
Right.
have. I mean, I'm taking names here.
Right. Right.
I would have
Right.
never met these people in my life, never heard their views if it
Hmm.
was not for social media. I would have never come across a Joe Rogan if it was not for YouTube.
Hmm.
I would have
Hmm.
never come across, let's say, Morning Combat by Luke Thomas and Ryan Campbell if it was not
Hmm.
for social media. So yes,
Hmm.
there cringe-worthy elements on social media? Yes, yeah, you just block them and move on. I think it is such a beautiful thing that we've
Right.
done. Yes, we are
Huh.
playing a weird experiment with ourselves, but I always look at it like this: the social media platforms gave me the option to block and mute people I don't want to consume. that create cognitive tremors in my neuronal makeup. So I don't have to. I just move on. Is it 100% successful? No. But I think social media has democratized the discourse. With democratization, there is a natural dumbing down of the discourse. Let's not make a mistake, because everybody is opining on everything. So we have really dumb replies, and that's fine, because look, at the end of the day, for a pre-industrial society, we're not that bright. Let's face the facts. We're a pre-industrial society. We are not a very bright society. But you're democratizing the discourse in a way. And first of all, Twitter is not a representation of India. I would say फिर भी Facebook, WhatsApp still till some extent, has a more Indian representation. Like I always said, Instagram is elite India, but TikTok was India.
Right.
TikTok was, अभी दोनों सेम चीजें ही कर रहे थे ना, वीडियो बना के लोग कर रहे थे. But TikTok was so much fun. At least for me, TikTok was fun. Instagram was so boring. हर आदमी वो मतलब प्लेकार्ड खड़ा करके हर चीज में आउटरीच कर रहा है. क्यों? Instagram was so much fun. They would do silly videos and stuff like that. So it depends on how you use social media, yaar. It's like, people, अरे मेरी TL पे गंद है. अरे बाबा, TL तो तेरे को वही दिखाएगी, because the algorithm is designed in such a way that you only see what you click. It is like that. So the point is social media dangerous? Yes. Is social media companies की monopolistic nature dangerous? Yes, and that is a separate debate to have.
Right.
So let us not mix the two, because you asked me a question on the societal impact. I believe in totality, in the boss, social media नहीं होती, you would not be talking to me.
For sure. And personally, you have figured out a very healthy way to navigate with social media, which I think I'll also try to like apply that to my social media feeds as well. Although कभी-कभी वो जो drama होता है वो भी देखने में मजा तो आता है. But one very nice thing you said, that like people are over opinionated and under informed, right? And अभी like so ऐसा होता है ना कि एक होता है कि you're thinking about something, then you put it out there, right? You say it to someone, it becomes a little more real. You put it out in the world, right? And then you write it down somewhere, and it is there like web crawler में वो cache होके रखा है. It's never going away, right? तो cache.google.com पे जाके देखोगे तो वो रहेगा, चाहे आप डिलीट कर भी दो तो भी. तो you have made it like real and for eternity. So now if people are putting their opinions out there, and don't you feel like, ठीक है, एक होता है कि certain चीजें, for example whether you are for gay marriage or against gay marriage, उस पे बहुत hard opinions, वो social issue है, that is one thing. But for something like which is like a news in progress, कि COVID का origin कहाँ पे है, या discussing कौन सा vaccine better है नहीं है, Covaxin versus Covishield versus Pfizer or whatever, उस पे लोग इतना hard opinion based stance लेके बैठ जा रहे हैं कि people are not talking to each other. If you have like, अच्छा I am for Covishield, I am for Covaxin, I will not talk to you, ऐसा scene भी हो रहा है, right? तो like ये तो थोड़ा एक ridiculous amount of hardlinerism on very very simple basic issues.
I think that they are victims of the technology, because the technology is based on hacking your negativity bias.
Right.
So you're only attracted to negativity. It's like, just think now, kabhi bhi on your phone, why is the refresh button like this? Why is it like this? Why isn't it like this? Because the Vegas slot machines were like this. Every time you would do this, there was a rush in your brain. They literally सालों को इतना मालूम था, उन्होंने वो refresh button भी वैसे ही डिजाइन किया. That's why. So you constantly get that rush through the thing. So that is one of those things. As far as people look, I never get this. I mean, you have parents in your house, you have brothers, sisters, siblings, whatever. You have cousins, you have girlfriends, boyfriends, depending on your sexual preference, whatever. Do you agree with them on every single issue?
Of course not, right?
Boss, I mean, you don't agree with the ones you love and care for. How the hell are you going to manage to agree with 1.4 billion people or millions of people on social media? When will you learn to realize that, हिंदी में कहते हैं मतभेद ठीक है, मनभेद नहीं होना चाहिए, बस वो करो यार. I mean, I don't know. I don't seek agreement with people. 95% of the people who come on my podcast, I don't agree with. Right. I genuinely don't agree with them on many issues. But that's not how I look at the world. I look at the world as a place where I have interesting conversations with people, where I want to learn from them. And I want to understand their perspective. Because if we look, what is the end goal in life? Human flourishing, right? That's the end goal. The world, We all want human flourishing. What we need to figure out is what is the best way of human flourishing while we take care of the environment also.
Right.
That's the discussion to have. And अभी किसी को कोविशील्ड पसंद है, किसी को कोवैक्सीन पसंद है, किसी को फाइजर पसंद है, किसी को वैक्सीन लेना पसंद है, किसी को वैक्सीन नहीं लेना पसंद है. I mean, I don't understand कितनों से झगड़ा करोगे. I mean, झगड़ा कर करके क्या मिलेगा? And I also do it sometimes. It's not like I don't. But in fact, I have a rule. People mock me. Sometimes people say I try to wiggle out of discussions. No. The reason I don't debate on Twitter is the text medium is not meant for debates. For me, Twitter, Facebook are like a town hall and an open diary where I share my thoughts. People can do what they want. Like, I don't read Facebook comments. I don't. My own public page, I don't read any comment. I don't care. I don't read my YouTube comments. I tell people to comment, but I don't read them. I don't care. I don't want to know your view.
It's literally a wall. लोग graffiti करके चले जाते हैं, right? अपने opinion.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing. And that's all my thing is. I'm sharing my thoughts. If there is something interesting that I gain out of it, fine. But it's like पहले लोग notebook में thoughts लिखते थे. मैं open wall में thoughts लिख रहा हूँ. किसको फर्क पड़ता है यार? That is the whole point. Why are we taking this? See, if you want to have a conversation, this is the way. Audio, video. Where I know what you're saying. I know I can see your eyes. I can see you. I can see your expressions. I can see your bhavarth. That is the way to talk and converse and discuss ideas. Twitter is not. Twitter is a town hall where you make pronouncements and you move on. Same applies to Facebook and Instagram. This is the way to have conversations. I have zero interest in doing what these other people do. No, I will argue with the other person and debate with them on Twitter. Maybe they have personality issues. I don't know. Maybe they're not comfortable talking. That's not my problem. I believe human beings should be primed to have serious discussions on audio, video. For me, those mediums are just, this is the data. I shared it. Like I share a lot of articles on social media. People who follow me will know that I will share, or almost daily I'll share articles. So whatever I read, in that whatever I find interesting, I share. And then I move forward. Sometimes I have threads. I'll write a thread on Twitter. And that's about it. I mean, I don't know. People take these things too seriously. I have seen people try to understand my personality through Twitter. I was like, hey Ram, क्या करे इस इंसान का?
So like you're talking, we started this with like opinions on COVID and stuff, right? So like I follow you on Twitter and you have been very outspoken against lockdowns, and a lot of people are for some reason very very pro lockdown for whatever, right? They seem to think that that's the one shot solution for everything. 9 बजे कर्फ्यू लगा दो क्योंकि 9 बजे के बाद तो वायरस सबसे ज्यादा प्रेवलेंट हो जाता है, दिन में तो चलेगा. So and I'm sure you would have faced a lot of backlash on social media for being anti-lockdown. So what were your reasons for being against lockdown? Like I believe it's more to do with like the larger social human impact, right? And how did you deal with the backlash?
They don't work. See, I would support a lockdown if it worked. It doesn't work. It's like you lock Mumbai down. 70% of Mumbai lives in slums. There is zero possibility of social distancing in slums. So why are we locking down for what? हमको अच्छा लगता है करके. कुछ तो किया. अरे कुछ किया तो अपने मुंह पे पट्टी बांध ले भाई. तो कुछ कर ले. I mean, it's stupid. People are, see, what happens is policy makers in India think that we have to show our people we are doing something. No. Don't do what is supposed to be done. That is the thing. See, I supported lockdowns when the first wave came in March and April. I thought we don't know, we don't have enough data. By the time May, June came, I was like, ये तो lockdown work ही नहीं कर रहा है because slums में तो ये फैल जाने वाला है. And then I was like, this is a stupid policy. And then I looked at the numbers and lo and behold, they don't work. They might work in a alienated society like Australia and New Zealand where there barely any human beings live. But in a country like India, in Mumbai, Delhi, look, you cannot. It's just a fact of life. And my saying it doesn't make me insensitive or that I don't care. It's just, you have to make, like, I would not want people to die of dysentery, diarrhea, heart attacks, diabetes, COVID, nothing. But the point is, I would like to design a policy that is the most effective. Lockdowns as a policy, A, don't save lives, and B, they cause more damage later on.
Yeah. Like, definitely like a lot of people, like small business owners, like shop owners and stuff, have lost a lot of money, and people have lost their jobs and stuff, and you do see that impact in society, yeah, because of the dip that the GDP took. Obviously, we're supposed to rise 20%. That's a V-shaped recovery. That's nothing to be too happy about. But we cannot deny the impact that we see on the streets. Like, at least anecdotally, it seems so. I'm based out of Ahmedabad, and anecdotally, it seems that the number of beggars on the streets has increased tenfold as compared to pre-lockdown levels. Right? Like, definitely there is impact on society at large, on the economy, which is trickling down onto the masses as well.
It will naturally, when you shut things down, it's going to happen. It's such a hilarious scenario. I find it laughable at times. And then like people will be like, mask nahi pehante log. I was like, mask nahi pehante log to kya karoge? Goli maar doge unko. Point hai ki beyond the point. You know, I was talking to a Westerner who was giving me logic or this, and then I asked him, okay, do you support Ichha Mrityu? You know what Ichha Mrityu is, no? Euthanasia. You know, some European countries have Ichha Mrityu, that if you don't want, you believe you're a vegetable or your body is not doing well, then those countries allow you. I was like, I'm not comparing COVID to Ichha Mrityu, but my point is, do you believe Ichha Mrityu is fine? He's like, yeah. I was like, and you're the same person who says, मैं तुझे COVID से नहीं मरने दूंगा. I was like, just think about it. तू डायरिया से मर सकता है, तू हार्ट अटैक से मर सकता है, तू डायबिटीज से मर सकता है, तू एड्स से मर सकता है, तू वैसे मर सकता है, मगर अगर तूने हिम्मत की कोविड से मरने की, तो मैं तेरी जान ले लूंगा दूसरे तरीके से, मगर कोविड से नहीं मरने दूंगा तुझे. This is what the discourse is right now. You are not allowed to die of COVID. Right. That's what I get. And there is an Olympics of death. Are you noticing what is happening? Nowadays you get a call. क्या है? अरे यार मेरा वो relative मर गया. अच्छा, कोविड से मरा. आपका फर्स्ट रिएक्शन क्या होना चाहिए? फर्स्ट रिएक्शन हो रहा है, आई एम वेरी सॉरी टू हियर दैट योर रिलेटिव डाइड. ना, आपका फर्स्ट रिएक्शन होता है, वो किससे मरा मेरे को पहले बता. अगर वो हार्ट अटैक से मरा, उसकी ब्रॉन्ज मेडल डेथ है. अगर वो कोविड से मरा, तो उसकी गोल्ड मेडल डेथ है. उसकी वैल्यू है. वो कोविड से मरा है भाई, सेलिब्रेट करो. कोविड से मरे हैं कोई. दे एंड नोटिस करना, ये हर टाइम होता है फोन कॉल्स पे.
हाँ. लाइक एक टाइम पे तो ऐसा ही था, लाइक किसी से भी बात करो, अच्छा आज का व्हाट्स द केस काउंट, सेंसेक्स में नंबर्स जैसे नहीं बात करते दलाल स्ट्रीट पे, वैसे लोग व्हाट्सएप पे कोविड नंबर्स डिस्कस कर रहे थे. आज गुजरात में इतना, केरला में इतना.
एंड नथिंग मेक्स सेंस. दिस इज माय पॉइंट. पॉलिसीज शुड बी बेस्ड ऑन द बेस्ट आउटकम्स पॉसिबल. लॉकडाउन एज अ पॉलिसी, इफ यू स्टडी द नंबर्स dispassionately, have failed. There is no proof that lockdowns led to less spread, because the zero prevalence surveys done in Mumbai categorically prove them wrong. Across India सबको तो हो गया कोविड. अरे सालो, तुमने क्या कर दिया? तुमने तो बिजनेस की भी ठोक दी. Right. तुमने तो ज्यादा लोगों को मार दिया. And no politician, whether it's the central government and Narendra Modi government or individual state governments, will admit that. And absurd policies, रात का कर्फ्यू, जैसे कोरोना रात को शहंशाह के जैसे बाहर निकलता है. And then absurd policies like 4 बजे तक का कर्फ्यू. सुबह 7 से 11 महाराष्ट्र ने दुकानों को परमिशन दी. अबे 7 बजे जाऊं सब्जी खरीदने, या टूथपेस्ट लेने 7 बजे जाऊं? क्या कर रहे हो तुम लोग? And these and you know what, the beauty,
and everyone will come out at that time, right? So the density of population, the temporal density will increase so much.
That's the whole point. And this is your policy makers. BST buses में anybody can travel, local trains में नहीं करने देंगे. हाँ, BST बस में जा सकते हो अनवैक्सीनेटेड लोग, मॉल में नहीं जा सकते हो. ये क्या लॉजिक है? कोई लॉजिक भी तो होना चाहिए ना इन चीजों का. See, the day governments realize that their job is to get out of our life, not get into our life, the world will be a better place.
Right. The most ridiculous rule has been कि गाड़ी चला रहे हो अकेले person, you have to wear a mask. I've had to pay a fine like twice because of that. So that hurts a little deeper for me personally. That one rule. Again, pandemic is still fresh in everyone's mind. This is like this dystopian reality is not going away. And one very weird thing I've observed, and I'm trying to tie it back to your interest in Indic philosophies and ideological systems. And you have been a very outspoken critic of untouchability and caste discrimination in general. You have just made that case a lot of time. What I have noticed, particularly in these, especially in the lockdown times, right, in the first wave, the second wave, घरों में ये हो रहा था कि people are keeping like maintaining a distance from their servants. Delivery वाला आ रहा है तो बाहर रख के घंटी बजा के चले जाओ. अगर सर्वेंट झाड़ू मार रहा है then people will move out of that room and go somewhere else. अगर लूपले है तो they'll probably go to the other floor and stuff. It's literally like वो जो those stories that you hear about untouchability where the shadow should not cross of a person. वही कर रहे हैं ना, like delivery boy का shadow तुम्हें cross नहीं करना चाहिए, ऐसा type हो गया. Now the thing is, yeah, right now there seems, at least at that point of time, there seem to be some rationale to do that. But think about like the kids who are growing up right now and seeing this behavior, right? That is something that might be normalized for them. And even in general, like if like COVID is not completely curbed, and every year there is a variant like the flu, which is quite possible. So this becomes an ongoing issue for the society. And do you think like this kind of behavior where you're treating other humans as something different will ossify and become some new kind of discrimination or untouchability in society?
I don't know. I'm not sure. It could not. I think I lean more towards it could not, because the baggage that discrimination and untouchability carry in current Indian framework and society is very high. So if you are someone who practices that, you're not going to be liked. As far as this current pandemic is concerned, now the pandemic fatigue has already started to set in. People really don't give a damn now. So I don't think so it's going to last very long. Hey, look at people. उनको बोलते हैं मास्क पहनने को, they wear a handkerchief as if the handkerchief is going to do anything.
Right.
So it makes no sense. I don't see this happening. You can always find anecdotes of people behaving like this, but in general, look, the economic reality, when it gets to you get over all untouchability, which is why I always say, right, urbanization and modernization is going to kill Jati Varna like nothing else has killed Jati Varna. हिंदी में कहते हैं ना, पूंजीवाद जातिवाद को मार देगा. And as much as the Jatiwadis hate me for saying this, that's just the way life is, and I don't see this happening a lot. As far as COVID is concerned, look, COVID might be there in some form or the other, but eventually we're going to attain herd immunity either through vaccination and do booster shots or through infection. Whether we like it or not, everybody's going to get it. We just have to be prepared for it. And I would recommend everyone to take a vaccine unless your doctor has advised you against it. Please go and get a vaccine. Yeah, I don't know why people don't. And so to answer your question, I don't see this kind of societal change. I'm worried about the kids and their education. That's a separate issue. And I'll be explaining that in detail in a monologue. But beyond that, no, I don't see untouchability or some kind of behavioral change making a comeback.
So let's hope so. But it always feels weird to see people treat other humans like like a disease, literally in this case. So I hope that doesn't occupy.
Some people are stupid.
Right. So again jumping back to like Indic philosophy. So I think we're towards the end of this, so I'll ask some short, more listicle type of questions. So what have been the most top 5 aha moments for you with respect to either Indian history or Indian philosophy and Indian culture? And maybe it could be something
I think
videos on.
When it comes to Indic philosophy and Indian culture, I've enjoyed Sri Krishna's, like I said, Nishkam Karma, Mahavira's Anekantvad, Buddha's Chatushkoti and Pratitya Samutapad. And I found from an evolutionary lens the ashram vyavastha, where, the Hindu ashram vyavastha, where you start with brahmacharya, then you go into grihastha, then sannyas and vanprastha. I found that system to be very interesting from an evolutionary point of view, where you had the society which had the meme of everything is basically, at the end of the day, we all have these agreed upon fictions, right? Human rights, economy, all these are agreed upon fictions, so that we can live in large numbers in a systematic way. And these thinkers, they realized that these are fictions, and there was one way of dealing with it, which I call the Buddha Mahavira way, where everything is this. We need to escape this reality. And the Hindus, I think the Hindu meme was evolutionary sound, in the sense that, yeah, these are fictions, you better play them. And then eventually you do Vanprastha and you go the Buddha Mahavira route. Don't do it at the young age, is the point. So I think that those are the things that in Indic philosophies I found very interesting. In the realm of logic, I think Nyaya and their syllogisms were very interesting. Those things were very interesting. Uh, Other than that, I think that the debating culture in India, the culture where these people vehemently criticize each other. Like, people don't realize if they read the ancient text, they'll be like, "बाप रे, ये तो एक दूसरे की ले रहे हैं बैठ के." But they did. They were fierce debaters, and I wish we develop that culture now. As the Hanlon's razor, never attribute to malice that which can be explained by stupidity or ignorance.
Right.
I still live my life by that rule.
Right.
I hope others too.
So especially, like, personally, I like this concept of Purva Paksha, where you're supposed to first summarize the other person's position, so that you first convey what your takeaway is on the other person's stance, and then you counter it or have your say. So that automatically forces you to empathize with the other person to some extent or the other. So you don't drift away across the spectrums as much as come together a little, and hopefully the discourse is something more positive, right? And I think that is something that definitely needs to make a comeback in modern discourse if we have to be a bit more harmonious as society going forward, right? So on your channel, you have guests from across the spectrum, from like authors to philosophers to geopolitics experts, politicians, and so on and so forth. So who have been your like top 3 favorite people to interview or do regular podcasts with?
I'll be very honest. I never had that. The only thing, I was very happy when I spoke to Michael Shermer, because he had a huge impact on my life. As a 20-year-old, I was gifted his book, Why Do People Believe Weird Things? And I've been reading Michael Shermer forever. I always found him to be a unique thinker. So I would say Michael Shermer was someone I really enjoyed. I loved talking to Vikram Sampath about his books on Savarkar. Abhijit is someone I talk to, or Harsh, or maybe Abhinav. It's like no one person. To me, subjects attract me. There's not a person that attracts me. In the case of a person, Michael Shermer also not the person, the books he writes and the thinking he possesses. So I would say in that sense. So I see, there would not be a podcast on my channel if I did not want to do it.
Right.
So for me, I have to be interested for it to happen, because I don't do any clickbait. So if I'm not doing clickbait, then everything has to come from what I like or what I'm interested in. So there is no real, I don't know how to say it, scenario where I would not, I would say I enjoyed this more than that. I mean, I enjoy all my podcasts. I always have fun doing it.
Right.
But yeah, Michael Shermer for me was a personal moment of happiness, because I grew up reading him. Right. So it was really nice to have him on the podcast in that sense. Right. But beyond that, I've never really had that kind. Like Makarand Paranspe came to the podcast. I learned a lot from him too. I mean, he's someone I've really read a lot and admired a lot throughout my life in my reading. So I mean, there's so many, so I can't pick or choose in that sense.
Right. And so a lot of your guests generally tend to lean towards the Indic side of the spectrum. I don't want to use left and right, because personally it doesn't make much sense to me in the Indian context. Every party in India is socialist, so everything should be leftist. But have you like tried to get speakers from the other perspective, from what is considered the leftist perspective in India today?
I have. I mean, I recently spoke with Shekhar Gupta. I previously had a pro 370 view. I had invited Ifra Jan to talk about it. Most of the times I invite leftists, they wiggle out of it, because they're like, no, I'm a fascist for them, so they don't want to talk. So what do I do?
I mean, not having a dialogue does not help the process at all, right?
I mean, I can't answer for them. So, I mean, I think a lot of my guests from the left are from the West. Michael Shermer is I think he's a libertarian, but he has some socially liberal principles. I mean, even Colin Wright now says that I was a leftist, but the left has changed. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's tough. Left wingers, they don't talk to you. They've come to a point where they've stopped engaging, or maybe I'm too irrelevant. It could be the latter too.
would you like down the line want to get the Republic show, like get some extreme guys on the left side and extreme guys on the right side and have them fight it out on your channel?
No, that would be the last day of my life. I'm not interested in shouting matches. Like, I did a limited series where I did a few, like 10-15 episodes called the Shastrarth, where
Right.
we debated ideas and concepts. And I think that was my contribution to the debate culture. Those were 2.5 hour discussions
Right.
where basically guests would make opening remarks, follow-up remarks, followed up by a 40-minute Q&A.
Right.
I would much rather do that, not the Republic style. No, and I have no issues. Republic, all power to them, and Arnab Goswami. I wish them all the best in life, but not my thing.
Right. But at least getting two different perspectives to talk at the same time, a debate, kind of a civil debate, let's say, that would be.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I held a CA NRC debate between two people I have immense respect for, Jai Sai Deepak and Nikhil Mehra, and Nikhil was opposed to NRC and Sai Deepak was pro NRC, and I am opposed to NRC personally, but I kept myself out of the debate. But that was there, and it was a wonderful discussion.
So I think let's wrap it up there. I think you are also running out of time. It was a really good discussion that we had. Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to us. And personally, I had a lot of fun talking to you. Wish we had more time so I wanted to discuss a lot of other things. Maybe we can do another episode sometime down the line. I hope you had fun as well. And any last words?
No, I wish you guys all the best. It was fun chatting with all of you. I wish all of you over there the best of luck and happiness. Keep pushing the envelope, keep having civil discussions, keep being open-minded, and like I said, don't attribute malice to people even when you disagree with them. Maybe they just have a different set of information, and as long as you follow that principle, you'll always have fun. So thanks for having me over.
Thank you so much, Kushal. Have a great day. Yeah. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Like, share, subscribe, and press the bell icon to never miss any updates from Samachar.